We'll start with the Sunday Telegraph. PM wants 2p tax cut before the election. Can't come a moment too soon, you might argue, or might it be a little too late for Rishi Sunak? The Sunday Times goes with Ukraine's new weapons plea to hit back at Putin. The Observer, not a very attractive headline for the Prime Minister. Stupid Sunak COVID scheme to be focus of virus inquiry. This is about his Eat Out to Help Out scheme. The Mail on Sunday goes with Labour's class war on Middle Britain. The Sun on Sunday sticks with the Schofield story. Holly's telly-speech on Phil, suggesting that when she goes back to the show tomorrow, she's going to give a heartfelt speech about everything that's happened. The Sunday Express goes with, as does the Telegraph, the autumn tax cut story. Autumn tax cuts to heal Britain, it says. The Sunday Mirror, again, another tabloid going for the Holly Willoughby story. Auntie Holly, Beeb plot to poach her from ITV after turmoil. Well, to discuss all that and more, I'm delighted to be joined by Nick Owen, former BBC and ITV presenter. Nicholas, lovely to see you this morning. There's lots to get through.
Good morning, yes.
We've kind of separated it into what are 4 different men up to this weekend. Right. Let's start with the first of those men, yes. Rishi Sunak. He's off to America, massive trip to the White House. It's all very important. It's going to be under pressure to perform. Nick, tell us all about it.
Well, yes, here we go. A British Prime Minister goes to the United States, guest, and the special relationship will be talked of again. Isn't it funny? All British Prime Ministers get seduced by the White House, I always think. You know, right from Margaret Thatcher onwards, you know, they go there and all. And, of course, American presidents are only interested, really, in promoting the interests of the United States. Surprise, surprise. Yes. And I always feel these occasions are a bit... well, a bit creepy. We're always told that so much will come out of it, warm words will be said, but so little ever seems to come out. Yes. But in this case, it is important, very important for Sunak. After all, the Brexit, one of the things about Brexit arguments was that we were going to do so well with trade deals with America. Have there been any sign of them at all? In fact, as far as I can see, Joe Biden, as left-leaning a president of the America as we're going to get, quite the contrary, seems to be looking at other parts of the world, much more interested in focusing on what's happening, probably rightly, in China and Taiwan and all that sort of thing, and dealing with other allies than dealing with us. So warm words will be said. Do you remember old Joe Biden came over for the Northern Ireland thing recently?
Yeah. Well, he came over from a holiday, and he tagged a trip to Northern Ireland on the back of it, I think.
He stayed one day in Northern Ireland, I think, and then went off to went off to Ireland for 3 days after that. So a great friend of this country?
Not really, and he keeps on making comments about the Good Friday Agreement being compromised by the Brexit negotiations. He's not a fan of the Windsor framework. So actually, Rishi Sunak might have a bit of an uphill struggle here with the US president, but optically, as he pitches a baseball...
yes, very, as you say. Apparently it's 60 foot you're supposed to pitch. Throw, let's use the word properly. Yes. Now, Rishi Sunak's a cricketer. And a good one, apparently. But whether he can actually handle the pitch as well, I just don't know.
Does he get any practice,
opportunity,
though, Nick?
of course.
I wonder if he gets any practice in secret. Can you imagine him trying to pitch balls across the White House lawn?
Yeah. I know he'd like to pitch balls at, but perhaps we'll come to that.
Well, indeed so. Well, let's move on to who he might want to pitch balls at, because there are 2 different people you could argue. The first of whom is Keir Starmer. What I find interesting about today's papers is we finally have a sort of policy platform from the Labour Party. That's been the criticism.
Yes.
Not enough substance, too many sound bites. Let's just go through a few of the headlines. Labour would spend millions on new Quangos.
Oh, Quangos, yes.
Labour's North Sea oil plan will cost 45,000 jobs, industry warns. Labour are under increasing pressure. Have they got their strategy right? Well, let's start with the Quango story, which is in the Telegraph, Nick. We were promised, weren't we, by David Cameron, a bonfire of the Quangos.
Indeed.
We don't necessarily like arm's-length bodies because it seems to most people as a way of passing the buck and the government not taking responsibility. What's Labour's plan, then?
Well, apparently Labour wants to load more Quangos. Just let's get the figures right. First of all, there are already 295, as you call them, arm's-length bodies, Quangos most people think of, there to sort of advise government, to hold a lot of meetings, I would say. And apparently what Labour want to do is produce a load more of them. Do you mind if I just... I couldn't resist. I've got a list of them here. If we're to believe what's in the papers, of course.
We always believe what's in the papers.
Oh, of course we do.
Yeah.
OK, here apparently are the new ones that Labour would like, or some of them. The Office for Value for Money, Skills England, Network of Climate Export Hubs, Community Payback Boards, National Cladding Task Force, Illicit Finance Task Force, Supply Chain Task Force. Lots more like that.
What I'd like to know is how much the Office for Value for Money is going to cost. I mean, it sounds to me to be slightly counterintuitive.
Well, we have the Office for Budget Responsibility already, don't we?
Yes.
But the point about all this is Labour are beginning to see signs of what Labour will come to the electorate with to try and win the next election. And, you know, I can't help thinking, Camilla, in this situation that the Tory government finds itself in, Labour would be rather better off saying very little.
Yes.
Really. Keep British dumb.
The Ming vase theory.
The Ming vase theory.
You just let them demolish themselves. You stand back and you not say very much. Although I think as the election draws nearer, questions are going to be asked about costing of policies. I mean, that story about the idea that their North Sea oil plan might cost 45,000 jobs. Also, we repeatedly put shadow ministers under pressure. How much is this all costing? They seem to have spent the windfall tax about 10 times. They're talking about non-dom status removal, generating billions, but clearly not enough billions. So it's difficult to know whether they can afford any of their pledges.
Well, indeed. But don't forget that this government, windfall tax, that's where the windfall tax has come from, this government, raising corporation tax and so on. So you might say they're in a race to raise taxes before they're in a race to try and cut taxes, or appear to do so.
Well, the Conservatives are talking about cutting tax, but the newspapers are talking about Boris Johnson. So we'll ask, what's Boris up to then? So we've got Dan Hodges writing in the Mail, Boris has no interest in an honest account of his actions during COVID. He only wants to embarrass Sunak. This is a story about, obviously, the former Prime Minister giving his WhatsApp messages over to Baroness Hallett, who's chairing the inquiry, bypassing the Cabinet Office. He and his allies seem to be suggesting that the reason Rishi Sunak opposes this is because Rishi Sunak's got something to hide in his own WhatsApp messages.
Indeed. I mean, it's... where do you start? First of all, Boris can't be damaged any further. Perhaps it's impossible to damage Boris, so he doesn't really seem to care what messages get handed over to the inquiry, and some of them are on a phone that's locked anyway and so on. But you're right, there is this sort of sinister theory going around that it's really all about Boris attacking his successor. And he's attacking, and the attack, if it comes, will be the famous eat out to save...
eat out to help out?
Eat out to help out.
Yes.
That was the expression, wasn't it? Where you could get 50% off your restaurant bill.
Been heavily criticised by a piece in the Observer
right in the
today.
middle of COVID, trying to get people back to work in the restaurant industry and so on, and might have cost a lot more lives, people say. That is actually denied. It must be careful. It must be said. The Cabinet Office say the figures don't tally one with another. But it does sound pretty damaging.
Also, it might expose his manoeuvring when it comes to ousting Boris, because there are some in the party that still will be blaming him come 2024 if they don't win the election.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right, yeah.
Let's move on to what King Charles is up to.
Ah, yes, the King.
Well, you were surprised by this trip to Romania because he's only focused on European countries so far, hasn't he? Since he's become king, he's been to Berlin. There was a trip to Northern Ireland, to be fair. There's a talk of a wider trip to Ireland, maybe, but also being in Romania.
Yes.
But he's a relative of...
Well, he's apparently he's a descendant of Vlad the Impaler. I'm not sure that many sort of reigning monarchs would want to make too much of that fact, really, to be absolutely honest. But there we are. Yeah, and he apparently loves going to Romania. It's a wild country, and he loves nature and all this sort of things. And he can relax a bit. We see pictures of him in a short-sleeve shirt and sunglasses going around
He's there
smiling.
without the Queen.
Without the Queen.
A solo visit.
Yes, I can imagine that if you'd said, Camilla, do you fancy a trip to Romania? I can imagine her answer probably contains some interesting language. But the point of this is this, I think. This week, isn't it? This week,
yes.
Tuesday probably, Prince Harry turns up in the UK to give evidence.
Yes.
The libel trials or the cases against newspapers that are going on. And lo and behold, his father, the King, is somewhere else.
So every time Prince Harry has been over, his father and his brother have been otherwise occupied, which is intriguing, isn't it?
It is. A bit sad, isn't it? A bit
it's sad. Do you think it's sad overall? Yes, I suppose that's the emotion about it all, that it's just... There was that story in the week about the National Portrait Gallery revamp not featuring that picture of William and Harry together. Yeah. And I looked at it yesterday and I thought, gosh, that's like a bygone era. It's like another life, those two being in the same portrait.
One quiet little thing, that was sort of sidebar to the story that I noticed somewhere is in one of the other papers, Mail on Sunday, I think, or was it the Telegraph? I can't remember, one of them, Telegraph, was that Charles is actually giving up his Welsh home. He's got to have houses all over the place, or residences all over the place. Actually giving up the one in Wales. I thought that was rather intriguing.
But doesn't he have to just completely downsize? Because at the moment he seems to be living in 3 different properties, partially in Windsor Castle, partially in Buckingham Palace, partially in Clarence House. Now, I appreciate Buckingham Palace is being renovated, but if he wants to be this kind of cost of living king and wants to be value for money and have a slimmed down monarchy, having multiple homes isn't going to wash well with the elite.
It doesn't look good. Doesn't look good.